it's the guy who knows how to navigate the space between what the agency is asking versus what they're ultimately trying to get.
I've been thinking of calling this "What Will They Remember?" And my thought was that we would just talk about, how commercial directors have experienced their space that they work in, getting more and more and more competitive. And then on top of it, you've got the dampening impact of COVID. And so, I was thinking, let's talk about, how do you stand out? And so I thought, naturally, why not talk to you? Because you, my guest today, are one of the greats, Sheldon Candis. So what do you think is the most important thing that a director should be thinking about, a commercial director, as they start to try to make a name for themselves today?
Your voice, like what you want to say and how you communicate it. And I feel like, especially for a director starting out in the commercial space, I feel like when I was coming up, it was either you could go shoot a spec reel, right? And you could go shoot a spec reel showing your ability to do a car commercial. But then the other way is if, in fact, you were a narrative storyteller who was fortunate enough to make a film, then you would get an opportunity, to make spots and to direct commercials. But I feel like my first opportunity, like my first commercial I ever did was a Honda commercial. And there was an ad agency, Muse, who for years, they were always championing me to do a car commercial. And I would always get down to the last picks, but never get the commercial because I didn't have any car commercial experience. But something really wonderful happened in advertising that gave me my shot. It was the moment that sort of real life people in documentaries, the documented experience of real life people in their lives got infused into car commercials, that I got my shot.
Cool. What do you mentioned, the beginning days versus the nowadays. It's probably only been a few years, right? Because, you're a youngin'. Right? What about, tell us a little bit about how commercial directing has changed, aside from those issues, what is a commercial director, for those that might be out there considering taking that path and wanting to be in that role? What are you responsible for these days, and how do you think of the job?
In the indie film world, when you're an auteur making a film, it's your baby, it's your vision. You fight tooth and nail to see that vision fully through. When it comes to working with ad agencies and brands, you have to remember that, you're here to execute the boards. You're here to execute the boards, right? And I think it's important that I feel like a way that you continue to get hired is when an agency producer or someone asks you, hey, could we try this? Could we do this? If your answer is yeah, or if your answer is, hey, you know what? That's a really great idea. Let's go for it. I think that's how you give yourself an opportunity of continuing to work in commercials. I think it's the moment that they feel like a director is in a wind tunnel, right, or has blinders on. I don't necessarily think that guy's going to work a lot.
Yeah. One thing that, being on the other side, one thing that I can tell you is really special about you is that even though, like, you might walk away from what you just said, a person, on the agency side, for example, could walk away saying, oh, he's really savvy because he's suggesting to young directors that they, say yes and, accept the suggestion, even if it's a dumb one, you might think. But I know from working with you that, and, by the way, we all make dumb suggestions from time to time, right? So whatever. But what I know about working with you is that I feel like you hear a suggestion and it's genuinely a spirit in your heart that's kind of like, sure, yeah, we can try that. As long as the first doesn't sweep in and say, absolutely, there's no time left. You're trying it not just to try it, to kiss the agency's ass. You're trying it because you believe that there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat, as it were. And it's amazing to see the product that comes out at the end from you.
Yeah. And, and I would have to say, too, as begrudgingly and as soul crushing of my origin story as a production assistant, as a guy who drove camera trucks and production trucks and working as an office assistant over at RSA, but I'm thankful by way of osmosis, I got to watch the process of a lot of really great directors in the commercial space. I got to see Brian Buckley. I got to see Spike Jonze and Spike Lee work in commercials. Even rock stars like Sam Bayer. I used to PA Sam Bayer. Now, Sam Bayer is a different type of one, right? Because he is like a rock star director. He gets to do what he wants to, but there's going to be very few guys like that. And it's the guy who knows how to navigate the space between what the agency is asking versus what they're ultimately trying to get. And I just realized that, it's a good director knows exactly what he or she wants, but is open to new ideas. So in my head, I know what I want, but I'm not closed off from anyone giving a great suggestion, You
reminded me of that path, the path into jobs like this. I know I too started, like when I first came to Hollywood, I started out PAing for a company called Mystique Films that was a business alias for Playboy that was like an offshoot of Corman and basically was turning movies every 3 weeks. And I was like the PA, that took the radios home at night and charged them and came back. Like I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, live and on the internet, but like, there were no turnarounds. Like we were coming back 2 hours after we left by the end of the week, And I wonder, like, is that the path in anymore? Are people still doing that?
What's so crazy is now you're taking me back to, I remember my first ever PA job. I thought it was a music video, but in actuality, it was my first 2 weeks in town. My dad had a family friend of a friend who was like a producer, and he got me my first job on set. But Bretz, now that I think back on it, my very first PA run on that job was before I came to set. They sent me to Kodak to get film with my student ID to get the discount.
That's awesome.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I just don't know if people, if that's the path you have to trod anymore, Tell us a little bit about if there was anything, was there a middle zone that wasn't soul crushing? Like what are the steps of the path that have been more empowering and made you feel better about the, steps to where you are now?
For me, it was work the least amount of days possible to pay my bills. So I back to my pursuit of being a writer-director as quick as possible. As a PA, I did what we refer to as Shawshank, which means that I did 10 years as a PA. And to the point where everybody on set, grips, electricians, art department, everybody's like, dude, when are you going to join a department? And I was so thankful that someone had said to me when I first started, hey, you're a director. Whatever you do, never join a department. And I was like, well, why is that? They were like, well, because you'll start making more money. Your quality of life will go up, which means you'll have more responsibility, and you'll be nowhere near your dream of realizing yourself as a director. And that's some of the best advice anyone has ever given me.
Yeah, that is great advice. I never heard it, and that's how I got trapped where I am today. Yeah. Man, that is a great insight. I love the way you lay that out too, and I'm sure that's still true. I mean, a lot of stuff has also changed from my perspective as a agency CD, and so I wanted to check with you if I'm right and how much of this, if you can shed some light for all of us on your perspective on it. Things like. Back when I started, it seemed like every director that you wanted, some of whom you listed, was on a roster of a production company, and they only worked for that production company. And so it was very clear sort of how you engaged, It seems like today it's just a lot loosey-goosier for a lot of people. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I found for myself, while I'm really thankful to, like, for example, have a meeting over at RSA as a director. Look, I'm thankful that someone sees the body of work I've built as a commercial director and calls me in, especially a place that, once again, I used to be an office assistant at. So for me, just the fact to get that call, right, is I think you celebrate even your smallest success along the way. But for myself, I know that, for example, RSA or big, huge commercial companies have a lot of directors on their roster. I choose to remain independent based off of the relationships that I've built with different producers or production companies. And so then therefore, I feel like I give myself a better opportunity at work because I'm not just at one place. And I found that has been very, very beneficial for me. Moving into 2021, I may now finally join a company. But even in that regard, it's, it'll be a smaller, more boutique place where there's only a small amount of directors and all of us are completely different from one another. Yeah.
And by the way, just because to some degree, I think that commercial directors can be to the lay people even in marketing, even marketing insiders, their names can be somewhat invisible, or they don't get the credit they deserve. I want to point out that you're working for huge brands. You're tell me if I get any of this wrong, but you're about to do something for Overstock, and you've been working for Abercrombie, and you fairly recently come off of Under Armour, was it? Yeah. So, and we'll talk about all those things later, but you don't have to say anything. I just want to run. Tell me what I missed, though. Now that I've set the table for what I believe your credits are. What are your favorite credits and things that you've gotten the opportunity to do?
Yeah. Well, I would Honda for sure because that was my first one. Mm-hmm. Honda, and then after Honda, I was really fortunate enough to do 2 campaigns with Ford. Did Lincoln. If I'm not mistaken, I'm the first person to shoot a Walmart spot with the CEO of the company featured in the spot, and so that I'm just really, really thankful, to shoot those brands and to have those opportunities, right? And to move from, the very interesting car commercial that's really, really not a car commercial as more so as it is a celebration of a real life person and their family. But the car is the vehicle that's basically driving their story, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I was going to ask you about your perspective on, could be a little different on the agency side and the director side, is the way that we think about, I guess, the depth of the engagement. And so what I mean is that I used to hire directors much more for, and maybe this would be true, like if I was next year when I'm hiring you off the top of the roster at RSA, maybe it'll be a little different, but it used to be much more that I hired directors for a shoot that took 1 or 2 days mostly, and maybe I had a half day of prep and a half day of wrap. But that was about the level of the sort of emotional engagement and working engagement. And don't get me wrong, most directors would just deliver so much in that 3 or 4 days. It was amazing, but my question is, it seems like we're going to talk a little bit more about how you and I have worked together in a minute, but it seems like in general, that also has gotten potentially a little looser where directors are can be involved more in the crafting of the whole story and way it gets approached. Have you found that to be true, or?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, my first experience with that was working with you and Eisenberg on Microsoft, and that for me that was my experience with Under Armour, which was what actually got me in to, commercials. But the relationship with Under Armour first comes from building a relationship with the brand and having a direct built relationship with the executives at the company and not necessarily the ad agency that's the agency of record. So that for me was, once again, I think the power of relationships, right? And so I'm able to start my commercial career off of the power of relationships. And then when I come to work at Eisenberg on Microsoft with you and Evan Ostrowski, once again, I'm getting an opportunity based off of a relationship, so yeah.
Yeah, that is still right. Like, I don't want to just go by that huge point that you just made, and it's been related to other ones you probably made earlier, but like, it's still relationships, right? It's still network, and it's still, and it's really important for us to think about it in the our I think modern cultural recommitment and attack to diversity and equity and inclusion. One of the things that can often be missing, depending upon someone's background, is network, is just the ability to be connected from, sometimes childhood, all the way up to where you want, to that dream, that vision of where you want to go, So it's a good point. And the other thing I wanted to ask you that about how you've seen it change is just the shape of campaigns and what that means about what's expected of a director. Like, I used to expect a director to come in and direct the spot, and then when it needed to be, turned into social and cut up for digital, that was all sort of a post-production job by, maybe even principally an editor, And now my perception is that, I see cameras turned up right to get square images on the set and, separate storylines and things like that. How much of that have you been dealing with, and what's your perspective on that?
I feel like now the social deliverable is a part of it, right? It's like, it's definitely going to be like the kind of main broadcast spot, and then there's going to be the cut downs. And I think because I'm an indie filmmaker and I'm always thinking about shoot more, get more. Because the craziest or toughest thing about making a movie is, especially indie film, is once you get to that edit room, if you don't have it, it's on you, the director. Like, everybody else is going on to their next project. Producers, actors, grips, electricians, crafty, catering. Everybody else is going to get another job. But if you're sitting in that edit room and you don't have it, then that's going to fall on you. And so I feel like I bring that approach to commercials, but I've learned it's very important to communicate to agency, hey, I'm definitely going to do and get exactly what you need, but I'm also going to grab this other stuff because I see this as a potential spinoff into social. So that's what I'm doing right now. That's what you're in the, you're in Village looking, and you're like, what's he doing right now? Oh yeah, Sheldon's grabbing extra stuff for social. And because I come from the AD department after being a PA for so long, I'm always running time in my head. And I realized that one of my most important responsibilities outside of shooting the spot is making my day. Making the day is huge, right? Nobody wants to talk about overtime and overages.
Yeah.
So, yep.
It's tough.
Yeah.
You were reminding me in there of this, amazing first AD that you had on the job that we're going to talk about that we did together. And it also made me just think about something we didn't call out, but we could now, is just, I don't think it's changed, right, that a director is also, I don't want to say only as strong as her or his crew, but it's so important. Like I tell my people when we're looking at, after we've hired a director, if there's a money crunch, there can often be this, all right, well, we're going to get this director, but, they're probably going to want this crazy DP. So we're just going to tell them that they got to use this DP and this grip and, and I'm like, no, because the thing is that everything that you see on that reel is a product of the team that they put together, and like they need their team, right?
Yeah, and that 100%, that's another thing too that I experienced coming up early was, a lot of the guys that I admire and love their work, they have their tribe, they have their crew, they have their DP, or they have their 2 or 3 DPs that they always shoot with. And what I find happens with that, and I've been fortunate enough recently, now to have working, and I found my DP and I found the other DP, and now I've even stretched into working and identifying great female DPs that I'm loving to work with to push that forward within our business. But it's really like what it comes down to, once again, is relationships, right? And the thing that I love about my relationship with my DP is that it's more than just a creative collaboration. I know his wife, I know his son. We care about each other. We have an investment in each other. And so you as a director, you feel safe in the space that even if you do have a off suggestion, like your DP and your tribe has your back. Everybody's going to make sure you succeed, as opposed to just being thrown into a situation with, I had that on some TV, directing television episodes, and it just wasn't it just was not a wonderful experience for me. Because I felt like I wasn't on the same team as my DP. Yeah.
Typically at Eisenberg, we structure a project like we did this project together, Sheldon and I, that was, and a lot of other great people, that was for Windows. They were basically wanting to make a series of videos that showed off the features of Windows 10 Pro. And particularly in this case, they had a demographic. Their research showed that there was a huge percentage of female Black business owners who used PCs and used Windows, and like the brand should be speaking to them. And there was this like terrific team inside of Microsoft, an organization actually, a grassroots organization that was formed inside of there called BlackLight, that is essentially an organization that just creates dialogue between and for Black people inside of Microsoft. And they had really been encouraging everyone in Microsoft to think about the fact that like it's okay to talk to a niche market. Like if you have a target who is using your product and loves your product, like make some stuff that speaks to them, right? You don't have to always speak to everybody at the same time. So Sheldon and I went to work on this project. Normally, we would have had a CD who would be kind of on the agency side, managing the client's creative needs and putting the whole project together. And Sheldon would have come in as the director of the video and the spot. But in this case, we said, hey, could you also be the CD? So Sheldon and I ended up working really directly together because he was both the agency CD and the director of the job. And that's kind of what I thought it might be interesting to talk about, because we've obviously spent the top of the episode just speaking about what a great and experienced director you are and picking your brain about your insights there. And you're also a Black director. And so, one of the reasons that we connected for that spot was because of my perception or decision or, combination of both, that if we're, making spots for Black people, Black women in this case, that we should be, having Black leaders on the team to be able to, do that authentically. And for better or for worse, at that point at Eisenberg, while we had, a number of Black artists at various places in the staff, writers and art directors, we didn't have a Black creative director who wanted to take the job. And we didn't have, we don't have any directors like on our roster. So sorry, this is like such a long ramble, but what I'm trying to set up is the interesting thing is we came together both because you're a great director and because you're a Black director. And on one level, people might say, well, that's really cool. But I want to dig into that a little bit. How do you feel about the fact that and I want to point out, it's so far, even though we've done, like you referred to with Honda, I think we've flirted a lot about doing other projects. So far, it's the only project we've done together. So keep me honest. What does that mean to you as a director?
Well, Bretz, it's very like, you're always so thankful for the opportunity. And I say that because, once again, I'm a guy who has thousands upon thousands of set hours as a production assistant and as someone in the AD department. I've been on so many different commercial shoots, dreaming and believing one day I would wake up and I would just be fortunate enough to actually be directing the spots. And that happened for me. And so every time it continues to happen for me, I really am in a deep place of gratitude for that. Because, once again, I know what it's like to be at the very bottom. And then also, too, listen, I come from a hardworking family. I watch my mom and my dad get up and go to work every day, bright and early. And what I find in our business is, especially as a director, you do all the work to pitch and bid and write the treatment and sell the client. Then you get into your prep. Then you get to your shoot days. And then there's post, and then it's gone. That's usually in a window of time of 2 months. If maybe it'll drag into 3. But it's usually about 6 weeks to 2 months. And, for me, someone who just loves to work and appreciates working, that can be really challenging, right? The stagnant time. So, when Eisenberg says, hey, we'd really love for you to be invested in the full campaign as a creative director and then direct the spots, I was, so thankful to get that opportunity. To me, just the muscle of work is a really, really good thing. But on the flip side of what you're asking me, but it is very challenging, because what often happens is when you're a Black director, majority of the time only get the opportunities for like the minority spot or the African-American targeted spot. And you just really want to be able to also do the general market and speak to a broader audience as well. It's, as I often say to people, my first love is a girl named cinema. Like I truly, honestly can say that. Like, I fell in love with cinema, and, it was because my mom and my dad faithfully on a Sunday evening took me to watch a movie in a theater. And to me, it was the most magical thing of the lights going down and the place darkening. You're seeing this magic on the screen. But I also identify, now that I'm older, that my connection to movies and storytelling comes from an emotional place. And it comes from the emotional place of, it's when we were the most happiest as a family, those Sundays watching movies together. And so that through line is what I'm always carrying into my identity as a director. And so for me, all the years I was fighting to get a commercial and to be established as a commercial director, I do find it quite interesting that the first work that I do and I continue to do is always these emotional experiences within advertising. And so I think it's Shakespeare, to thine own self be true. This is truly who I am as an artist. And I feel that, also, like, listen, my big pitch to Under Armour from the very start was, listen, you guys sell sneakers and apparel, but let me sell your athlete stories. And so then the counter to that is, well, what do you mean? Well, what I mean is that majority of people will know Tom Brady is arguably the greatest quarterback ever, but very few people will know his origin story of being a backup bench player at the University of Michigan. And how, if the guy in front of him hadn't gotten hurt, we very well would have never known a Tom Brady. To me, it's that story. It's that connection to his story and the emotion of getting to that place, I believe, is what in our society now is what needs to be sold, what needs to be invested more. And if you think about it through social media, through this, you're actually seeing this. People want a connection to the real. People want a connection to the real person. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about, I'm such a huge fan of those spots for Under Armour with Misty Copeland. What was the story in those? Like, did you discover anything special as you worked on those?
I did. And, and for me, I had been pitching them for over a year, and they had just signed her, right? A ballerina as an athlete, right? This mm-hmm. idea of signing a ballerina to a sports apparel brand. And they were like, hey, so this thing's coming in, and what do you think? And I was like, oh yeah, this is amazing. This is basically my pitch that I've been pitching you about, telling the stories of the athletes. But it was really awesome there because, I'm real big. I'm a research nut. And this is because one of my filmmaking heroes, Michael Mann. Michael Mann is like so crazy about his research, right? And I got that from listening to his DVD commentaries, director commentaries. And so I'm doing this research on Misty Copeland, and I find this New York Times article. And the very first line of the story is the ice bucket. And it hits me. I'm like, oh yeah, of course. She's a ballerina. She has a symbiotic relationship with a bucket of ice. Like, her feet are constantly at war in those point shoes. And so then that became this visual thematic throughout the series of a foot being submerged into ice water. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the other thing that comes through to me really clearly when you tell these stories is the deep amount of empathy in your heart, comes through really clearly. And it makes sense to me because what I experience one of your gifts as, both in social settings that we've been in together, but really more importantly from a work standpoint on the gig that we did together. And I have also seen it. I know I can see it in the other work that I've seen on your reel, is the ability to pull genuinely emotional and engaged performances, particularly out of real people or, athletes or ballerinas, who aren't necessarily used to expressing themselves as more of an actor, and that's, also related to empathy, right? It seems to me that those things are connected. Like it's one of that ability with actors makes you really special. And I wonder, what are the other red threads that run through your work? I know when I mentioned, oh, well, we can look at the Misty Copeland, and then I think I mentioned something else to go with it, and you were like, well, there's actually a really clear connection between the Lincoln and the Misty Copeland. Tell me about that. Is that a visual thing or an emotional thing?
Yeah, it's an emotional and a visual thing. That, for example, the Lincoln spot is with this singer Marsha Ambrosius, and she's from a group called Floetry. And so for me, if I'm fortunate enough to be this narrative filmmaker / documentary filmmaker who's getting the opportunity to do ads, and I'm mainly being hired because I have this hybrid genre I call docu-cinematic, right? And so when it comes to the Lincoln spot with Marsha, I'm thinking about her active life. And at the time, she had just become a mother for the first time. She had her first child. And she was glowing, literally, as a person, but when she spoke about her child and her husband, she had a likeness to her. Well, for me, that's the added thread of that spot that nobody sees is so important to me. This woman, so you're celebrating women, right? This Lincoln spot is the celebration of this woman. Well, this woman is telling you now the thing that she's celebrating most is motherhood. And motherhood connected from the way her mother raised her, the way she heard stories about her grandmother, that is now being connected to her daughter. That is, like, to me, is just I honestly get a chill thinking about that. To me, that's the power of raising the bar in advertising, telling someone's story, their genuine story. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great way to sum it up. I guess the only thing else I would ask is, sometimes I like to, and I think this is a good one to come back after we've talked through all of it and give you one last opportunity to sort of say, what advice would you have to like young directors that are out there watching this episode? What is it what are they going to remember you for?
I mean, more so than like my legacy, I would pass along to all of them, like, just keep working at it. And I know it becomes very frustrating to hear someone say, just keep working at it. Your shot's going to come. But I do believe it's important, because I can't tell you how many spec spots I shot that you'll never see, how many like rappers with a little bit of money who wanted a music video. But for me, that was my extended education. Like, right, I was getting an education on set, watching directors work with their crew, make their days. But then I also was continuing to work and shoot any and everything I could. A female cupcake food truck owner, like, spending the day on her truck as she made cupcakes and shooting that and editing that together. I just think that it's important to just keep shooting it. And I think the more you shoot, the closer you get to it happening for you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being our guest and sharing some amazing insights. I'm already thinking about, we do these graphics throughout the show to really highlight those things that I'm like, ding, 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 light bulb. And there's a lot of them in here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Bretz.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Listen In. You'll always find us streaming on LinkedIn, along with live chat comments from myself and guests. After the stream is over, we archive the show here on our LinkedIn page for Eisenberg, and you'll also find the episodes at AListDaily.com. So have a great week, and as always, keep your ears on.